So in case you didn't know, earlier this week, Jaguars head coach Doug Pederson told NFL Network, yes, the Jaguars will be playing their starters in the first preseason game, and presumably they'll probably see a little bit of action in at least a couple of preseason games, if not even all three preseason games. So that got me thinking a little bit as we head into today's game against the Dallas Cowboys, why Doug Pederson would risk injury to some of his key players in preseason action. Now, of course, the first thing to understand is the starters, especially the key starters, will probably not see much time on the field. It's probably going to be one of those cases where maybe Trevor Lawrence is in for one possession, maybe two if they go 3 and out immediately. But Trevor Lawrence and company are not going to be spending a lot of time in the game. You're going to see a lot of backups in all of the preseason games, but especially in the first and last preseason games. So Doug Pederson is probably just trying to get the team to kick off some rust. And there's actually decent rationale for why the Jaguars would like to kick off some rust. So if you recall from last year, the Jaguars suffered a lot from slow starts in games, even in their winning streak. When they were winning all their games towards the end of the season to get into the playoffs, they had a lot of comeback victories against really actually pretty good teams. The Ravens game comes to mind, the Cowboys game, of course, the AFC South Championship game in the last week of the year against the Titans. All those games, the Jaguars started slow, and then, of course, the wild card game. Jaguars started slow and were able to come back. But you can't really make a living in the NFL, especially against good teams, on coming from behind in all of these games. So I think what Doug Pederson is trying to do is get his team fully prepared, or at least as fully prepared as possible for week 1 at Indianapolis. So a divisional game, unlike last year, where the Jaguars started with the Commanders. This year they start with a divisional game against a team that has possibly a decent roster, I think an undervalued roster maybe at this point, and a young quarterback. I think it's likely Anthony Richardson is the week 1 starter for the Colts. The Colts might not know what they don't know. And what I mean by that is they're probably not really going to be contending for a playoff berth. Or at least they shouldn't be on paper. But they're a young team, especially at their leadership position of quarterback. Anthony Richardson might be able to make some magic happen in similar fashion as occasionally Justin Fields just makes things happen for the Chicago Bears that wouldn't otherwise be possible with most other quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson, super raw talent, but if you don't properly defend his legs, he's going to make you pay for it even in the NFL level. There's no reason he won't be a player that's going to really scare some defenses. So the last thing the Jaguars want is to go into week 1 with none of the rust kicked off by not playing any starters really at all through the preseason and get jumped on by the Indianapolis Colts early and drop a divisional game week 1 of the year. The Jaguars are going into this year as the divisional favorites, really the heavy favorites, so they don't want to drop a quick divisional game. The best way to get yourself ready is undoubtedly live action. So by getting his starters in, Doug Pederson is almost certainly trying to avoid being sort of the slower team to get started in 2023. Now, of course, this comes with huge risk. If one of the key players on the Jaguars gets injured in preseason action, you will absolutely see pundits, both nationally, locally, everything. Pundits will pile on to Doug Pederson and ask the question, why were these players playing, especially if it was Trevor Lawrence? Because realistically, the Jaguars have a good roster with a lot of weapons. A backup quarterback might be able to make the Jaguars a halfway decent team even. Probably middle of the road, but they probably wouldn't win the division. Or they might be in the thick of it with the Tennessee Titans at that point. But if Trevor Lawrence were to get injured, why was he playing? That's going to be the question. And this is the type of decision that there is an upside here. And I want to be clear, there is an upside. You want to get up on the Colts early and take care of business. And then from the get-go, from the starting bell of the season, the Jaguars are the leaders of the division. That's what you want. So the upside is you're preparing your team to do just that. The downside in this case, though, is potentially much worse than the benefit, because realistically, it's going to take a few games for all the teams in the NFL to truly get into their form that they'll be in for most of the season. This is why every season we see some surprise teams jump out really quickly to pretty good records like 3-0, 4-0, 4-1, And then every season, there's one or two of those teams that started out really quickly. They just fall off the face of the earth. They get terrible quick. It's the other teams hit their stride. So, yes, the benefit is there. The problem is, and this is my issue with it, it's a fringe benefit. It is going to be beneficial in week 1. Hopefully, the Jaguars are ready to meet the Colts in week 1 because, frankly, the Colts will be pretty ready, I think, because they're going to have their players playing significant time in the preseason, especially Anthony Richardson. Like, he's going to see preseason action to get him ready for the season. Most rookie quarterbacks do. I don't know if the benefit the Jaguars get from doing this is worth it, though, for the risk. And to be clear, the risk is at least somewhat minimal. We're not going to see Trevor Lawrence playing the entire game. We're going to see him playing in a couple of series at most, I would expect anyways. So it's not like he's getting an entire game of action. What we're talking about here really is a handful of drives throughout the entire preseason to kind of get him a little bit ready. So the risk isn't huge, but the potential downside of doing this is huge. Sort of like if everything goes exactly to plan, you do get a benefit. However, if one snap goes dreadfully wrong, it puts the entire season in jeopardy. And I don't know if I, as the head coach, if I were the head coach, if I were in Doug Pederson's shoes, I don't know that I would make the same decision. However, I'll say this too. I don't hate the decision. I don't think it's necessarily the wrong decision. It only becomes the wrong decision if the wrong thing happens. So this is something we used to see all the time. And then in the last 10, 15 years, you've seen it less and less. Starters just don't really play, especially key starters just don't really play in preseason action, and it's because of that risk of injury. I don't know that I love the decision. I don't necessarily hate the decision, but it is a risky decision nonetheless. I do want to hear all of your thoughts in those comments, though. Would you make this decision? If you were Doug Pederson, would you play your starters? Would you sit your starters, especially for the first preseason game? Let me know down below. And of course, while you're down there, like, share, subscribe, all those things. YouTube will send you a few more videos for you to watch from the channel, and I will see all of you in the next one, which likely will be digesting what went on in this first preseason game against the Dallas Cowboys.